My name is Alina. I'm not a famous person. I am not a hero in a movie. I am just a me. A simple girl living a simple life. But every heart has a story. And today I want to share mine with you. I grew up in a small town. It was the kind of place where people knew each other by name. The streets were quiet, and the air smelled like fresh rain after every storm. I remember the little garden in front of our house. It had roses, lilies, and a single old bench. That bench was my favorite place. I would sit there for hours dreaming about life. When I was a child, I believed life was simple. Wake up, smile, play, and go to sleep. But our life changes. People change. And sometimes your heart changes too. When I was 16, I met someone who would change everything for me. His name was Daniel. Daniel was not perfect, but to me, he felt like perfection. His smile had a warmth that could make the coldest day feel like summer. His voice was soft, but strong enough to stay in my heart. We first met on a rainy afternoon. I was holding an umbrella, walking home from school. The wind was strong, and my umbrella almost flew away. Suddenly, a hand grabbed it and held it still. It was Daniel. He smiled and said, "Careful, the wind can be tricky." I laughed. It was such a small moment. But in that small moment, something in my heart woke up. From that day, we started talking. Not much at first. Just little conversations. About school, about music, about the weather. But slowly, our talks became longer. We started sharing secrets. We started sharing dreams. And without realizing, we started sharing our hearts. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And Daniel became the most important part of my days. We would meet at the same bench in my garden, the one I loved since childhood. He would bring coffee for me, even though I always told him I preferred tea. And he would laugh, saying, "One day I will make you love coffee." Sometimes we didn't even talk. We would just sit, watching the sunset, listening to the sound of the wind moving through the leaves. And in those quiet moments, I felt safe. Daniel had dreams, big dreams. He wanted to travel the world, to see the oceans, to climb mountains, to meet people from different cultures. I was different. My dreams were small. I just wanted a peaceful life, a home filled with love, a family, a garden where the roses never stopped blooming. But even though our dreams were different, our hearts felt the same. We promised each other, no matter where life took us, we would stay together. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold, Daniel looked at me and said, "Alina, will you always be here? Even if I chase my dreams far away?" I smiled softly. "I will always be here, Daniel, no matter where you go." That night, I didn't know that promises can be broken, not because people want to break them, but because life has a way of changing everything. A few months later, Daniel got an offer, a job in another city. It was everything he had dreamed of. When he told me, I forced myself to smile. I told him I was happy for him. And I was aim. But deep inside, a quiet fear started to grow. What if distance changes us? What if time changes him? What if I lose him? He held my hands and said, Alina, trust me. This is just the beginning. I will come back for you. And I believed him. Because when you love someone, Chewy, you believe every word they say. The day Daniel left, the sky was gray. It was the kind of day when even the wind feels heavy. I stood at the small train station, watching him carry his suitcase. His smile was still there, but I could see the sadness in his eyes. He hugged me tightly, and for a moment, I wished time could freeze. Write to me, I whispered. He nodded. Every week. And then he was gone. The train disappeared into the distance, taking with it a piece of my heart. The first few weeks were fine. He called me every night. We laughed. We talked about his new job, his new apartment, the new city. And then slowly, the calls became less frequent. Sometimes days would pass without a message. I told myself he was just busy. I told myself it was normal. One day, I found an envelope in my mailbox. It was from Daniel. A letter? I opened it quickly, my heart racing. He wrote about the places he had visited, the new friends he had made, and how much he missed me. I smiled the whole time I read it. And for a while, everything felt okay again. We started writing letters to each other. Long, detailed letters. It felt different from talking on the phone. Letters had weight. Letters could be held, kept in a box, read again and again. But as months passed, his letters became shorter. And then they stopped coming. I still wrote to him every week, telling him about the roses in the garden, about the way the seasons were changing, about how the bench was still waiting for us. But my letters were never answered. Nights became longer. Silence became louder. And my heart started to understand something my mind refused to accept. Daniel was drifting away, and I was standing still. Winter arrived quietly that year. The mornings were colder. The evenings were darker, and the garden looked almost empty without its roses. I had not heard from Daniel in months, but still, I waited. Every evening, I would sit on the old bench, watching the road, hoping, just maybe, I would see him walking towards me. One night, as the wind howled through the trees, I received a message. It was from an unknown number. My hands shook as I opened it. It was Daniel. Alina, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. But life here, it's different now. I have changed. And I think you deserve someone who can be there for you. I read those words again and again. They didn't feel real. The boy who once promised to come back for me was now saying goodbye. Through a few cold lines on the screen, tears blurred my vision. My heart felt heavy, as if someone had quietly stolen the light from it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him why. But no words came. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the garden until morning, watching the sun rise slowly, painting the empty bench in soft gold. And in that moment, I understood something I had never wanted to understand. Sometimes, love doesn't end because of hate. It ends because people grow in different directions. And no matter how tightly you hold on, you can't stop them from leaving. The following weeks felt heavy. Days passed, but I felt like I was standing in the same place. The same bench. The same silence. Spring returned after a long winter. The garden began to bloom again. Tiny buds appeared on the rose bushes, and the air carried the scent of fresh beginnings. But inside me, things were still quiet. I missed Daniel. I missed the sound of his voice. I missed the way he made the world feel lighter. But slowly, I started to realize something important. I was still here. I was still breathing. And life was still moving forward. One afternoon, I sat on the bench, watching the sunlight dance on the petals of the roses. A little girl from the neighborhood walked past. She stopped, looked at me, and said, "Your garden is beautiful." It was such a small thing, but for some reason, those words felt like warm sunlight on a cold day. I smiled. "Thank you." After she left, I thought about all the moments I had missed, while waiting for someone who was never coming back. I decided it was time to live again. I began planting new flowers. I painted the old bench's soft shade of blue. I started writing in a diary, not letters to someone far away, but words for myself. Day by day, my heart felt a little lighter. The pain didn't disappear overnight, but I learned that it's okay to carry the memory of someone you loved, as long as it doesn't stop you from loving life again. Months later, on a warm summer evening, I sat in the garden with a cup of tea. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. The air was filled with the sweet scent of roses. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered to myself, "It's okay, Alina. You're going to be okay." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Summer brought warm winds and long days. The garden was alive again. Birds sang early in the morning, and the sky stayed bright until late in the evening. I spent my afternoons reading under the shade of the old tree. Sometimes I would hear laughter from children playing nearby, and every time I heard it, a quiet smile would touch my lips. Life was not the same without Daniel, but slowly, it was becoming mine again. I started helping at the small library in town. The smell of old books, the soft sound of pages turning, and the gentle whispers of visitors' eyes made me feel at peace. One day, while arranging books on a high shelf, I dropped one. It landed at the feet of a stranger. He picked it up and handed it to me. "Careful," he said with a kind smile. "You could hurt someone with these heavy books." I laughed softly. It was the first time in months. that I laughed without forcing it. The stranger's name was Ethan. He had just moved to our town, looking for a quieter life. At first, we only spoke at the library. Little conversations about books, weather, and sometimes about the best coffee in town. I didn't think much of it. But over time, I noticed something. Ethan listened. Really listened. One afternoon, we sat outside the library, sharing a slice of lemon cake. He asked, "So, Alina, what's your story?" I hesitated. It had been so long since someone had asked me that. And so AFO. I told him. Not everything. Not the deepest parts. But enough for him to understand that my heart had been broken once. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't say you'll be fine. He just nodded. And somehow that was enough. Weeks passed, and Ethan became a familiar part of my days. We went on long walks through the park, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying the quiet. He never asked for more than I could give, and I never promised more than I could keep. One evening, we walked past my garden. He stopped and looked at the roses. "They're beautiful," he said. I smiled softly. "They've been through a lot, but they still bloom." I wasn't sure if I was talking about the roses or about myself. The seasons began to change again. Golden leaves covered the streets, and the air smelled of cinnamon and wood smoke. Ethan and I had grown closer, but there was still a part of my heart I kept hidden. One day, he asked if I wanted to join him for a small trip to the seaside. At first, I said no. Traveling had never been my thing, and the thought of leaving my safe little world scared me. But that night, as I sat on the bench in my garden, I thought of all the moments I had missed because I was too afraid to move forward. The next morning, I said yes. The seaside was more beautiful than I had imagined. Waves crashed against the shore, and the salty breeze tangled my hair. Ethan walked beside me, carrying 2 cups of hot tea. We sat on a large rock, watching the horizon. For the first time in years, I felt light, not because I had forgotten the past, but because I had learned to carry it gently. Ethan looked at me and said, "You have the kind of strength that doesn't shout. It's quiet, but it's there." His words stayed with me. Maybe I was stronger than I thought. That night, as we drove back to town, I realized something. Life doesn't give you only one chance to be happy. It gives you many. You just have to be brave enough to take them. Days after the seaside trip felt different. The air seemed lighter. My mornings felt less heavy. I still thought of Daniel sometimes, but the thoughts no longer hurt as much. One afternoon, while working at the library, Ethan brought me a small gift. It was a notebook. On the first page, he had written, "Fill these pages with the pieces of your heart." It was such a simple thing, but when I held it, I felt seen. I began writing again. Not letters to the past, but notes about the present. Moments, feelings, little joys that I didn't want to forget. Winter returned. Snow covered the garden in soft white. The bench looked lonely, but somehow peaceful. Ethan and I started meeting at the cafe instead. He loved telling stories, and I loved listening. One evening, he told me about his own heartbreak. The person he once loved had left without a word. In that moment, I realized we were both survivors of different storms, and maybe that's why we understood each other so well. On New Year's Eve, our small town gathered in the main square. There were lights, music, and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery. When the clock struck midnight, Ethan looked at me and smiled. "No resolutions?" he asked. I thought for a moment. "Just one," I said softly. "To keep moving forward." He nodded. "That's a good one." Spring came again, and the roses bloomed brighter than ever. One afternoon, I was sitting in the garden, writing in my notebook, when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and my heart stopped. It was Daniel. He looked older, tired, as if life had been heavier than he expected. "Alina," he said quietly, "I wanted to see you, to say I'm sorry." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Memories flooded back. The letters, the promises, the silence. "I forgave you a long time ago," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I'm still waiting." His eyes dropped to the ground. "I understand." We talked for a while, about where life had taken him, about how dreams can sometimes cost more than we expect. When he left, I felt lighter. It was as if a chapter had finally closed. That evening, I told Ethan about Daniel's visit. He listened quietly, then said, "I'm glad you got your closure." I smiled. "Yes, so am I." It was then I realized Ethan never tried to compete with my past. He simply walked beside me in my present, and that was more than enough. Months passed, and Ethan became not just a friend, but someone I trusted deeply. We spent summer evenings on the bench, watching the stars. Sometimes we spoke. Sometimes we just listened to the night. One night, he said softly, "Alina, you deserve all the happiness in the world, and I hope I can be part of that." My heart warmed. For the first time in years, I felt ready to let someone in again. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were still days when old memories hurt. But now, I had someone who understood, and who never rushed my healing. We took small trips together, to the mountains, to quiet lakes, to little towns with cobblestone streets. Everywhere we went, I carried my notebook, filling its pages with moments I never wanted to lose. One autumn evening, Ethan surprised me. He took me to the seaside again, to the same rock where we had once sat with our tea. As the sun set, he handed me a small box. Inside was a silver locket. "It's not a promise for forever," he said softly. "It's a promise for today and every day after, as long as we choose each other." Tears filled my eyes. I nodded. I choose you. Years have passed since then. The garden is still full of roses. The bench is still there, painted blue. Ethan and I built a life together, one filled with simple joys, quiet mornings, and endless conversations. Sometimes, I think back to the girl I was when Daniel left. She thought her story was over, but she didn't know. It was only beginning, and now it was beautiful. As I sit in my garden, with the evening sun warming my face, I whisper to myself, "It's okay, Alina. You're always going to be okay."